If you're a runner, you know the feeling. One moment you're cruising, feeling strong, and the next. Maybe there's that niggle, a tight hamstring, maybe,
Right.
or a sore knee, a shin splint that just won't quit. It really feels like almost everyone who runs regularly has a story about an injury, doesn't it? But what if understanding some fundamental physics of your run could actually help you navigate those pitfalls? Maybe even improve your performance. Today we're taking a deep dive into something pretty fascinating. This intricate relationship between your running speed, how many steps you take per minute, that's your cadence, and the very real forces your body experiences every single time your foot hits the ground. We call those ground reaction forces, or GRFs. And here's where some new research throws a fascinating curveball. While we often hear that increasing your cadence can reduce injury risk, this study reveals that when you actually speed up your run, those impactful ground forces can still jump significantly, even if your steps per minute naturally increase. So it's not quite as simple a trade-off as we might think.
That's exactly right. And what's particularly exciting about the source material for today's deep dive is that it's brand new. Original research just published this month in the International Journal of Sports Physical Therapy. And this study, it really aims to fill a crucial gap in our understanding, specifically focusing on how experienced runners respond, not just beginners.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack the immediate effects of changing your running speed on these key biomechanical factors. And maybe most importantly, what that might mean for you, the runner, aiming to stay healthy, strong, and, perform at your best. All right, let's get into it. So let's set the stage a bit. Running is incredibly popular worldwide. I mean, millions of people lace up their shoes every day. I've certainly had my share of shin splints over the years. And it really highlights how pervasive this problem is because despite its popularity, there's a shockingly high incidence of injuries. The statistics are pretty startling, actually. Somewhere between 50% and, get this, 90% of long-distance runners experience a running-related injury every single year. That's almost everyone.
It truly is a huge number. And from a biomechanical perspective, previous research has consistently shown a clear link between a lower running cadence specifically, think less than about 170 steps per minute, and an increased risk of injury. The thinking here is that a lower cadence tends to increase those ground reaction forces, the GRF that you mentioned. It makes sense, right? Fewer steps per minute often means longer strides.
Right, you're covering more ground with each step.
Exactly. And when you land, you're experiencing a greater impact. Kinetic factors like peak braking force, that's the horizontal force that kind of slows you down when your foot hits the ground, and higher loading rates, which is about how quickly that force builds up after impact. These are, they're pretty well established as known injury risk factors.
Okay, so we know lower cadence, higher forces, higher risk, generally speaking. But what exactly was still missing? You mentioned experienced runners and speed specifically.
That's the key question. What hasn't been really clear in the existing research is exactly how running speed itself influences both cadence and GRFs together, especially in experienced runners. You see, previous studies, they often looked at recreational runners, maybe. Or they only looked at preferred running speeds, not a range. Or maybe they didn't measure both cadence and GRFs at the same time.
Okay, so they weren't looking at the immediate interplay as speed changed.
Precisely. That's the specific gap this new research aimed to fill.
Got it. And so the specific purpose of this study was to examine that immediate effect of changing running speed on both running cadence and those ground reaction forces. And they were looking specifically at a sample of experienced runners. Their hypothesis was pretty straightforward, wasn't it? They expected increases in both.
Yes, exactly. They hypothesized that increasing speed would lead to increases in both cadence and GRFs. Fairly intuitive, perhaps, but needed testing.
And who were these experienced runners they studied? Tell us about the participants.
Right. So the study involved 30 participants aged between 21 and 49. There was a bit of a gender split, 11 female and 19 male. And the experienced part is really key here. These weren't just casual joggers. They had to be running at least 15 miles, that's about 24 kilometers, per week for a minimum of 1 year. And importantly, have no recent running-related injuries in the 3 months just before the study. So this ensures the data reflects seasoned runners, people used to regular training.
Okay, that makes sense. So how did they actually measure all of this? What was the setup?
Their methodology was quite clear and systematic. Participants ran on an instrumented treadmill.
Which is like a treadmill with force sensors built in.
Exactly. force plates integrated into the belt so it can precisely measure the impact of each step and all the forces involved. Very detailed. So after a short acclimatization period just to get used to running on this specific treadmill, they then ran at 7 specific predetermined speeds. And these were done in increasing order. They range from a 10-minute mile pace, which is about 2.68 meters per second.
Okay, a moderate pace.
All the way up to a pretty brisk 7-minute mile pace, or 3.83 meters per second. And the data. It was meticulously collected during the final 30 seconds of each 90-second running bout. This gave them consistent, reliable measurements at each speed.
And what exactly were they measuring during the 30 seconds? I imagine it's more than just steps per minute, right?
Oh, definitely. Beyond cadence, they measured various ground reaction forces. Things like overall peak vertical force, basically the maximum downward force.
How hard you hit the ground.
Yes. And vertical impact, peak, that initial jolt when your foot first lands, and peak braking force, which we mentioned earlier. But they also measured temporospatial variables. Fancy term, but it just describes how your body interacts with the ground through time and space. So that includes stance time, literally how long your foot is actually on the ground, and step time, the duration of a single step from one foot landing to the other. It's probably worth noting that while there was that gender imbalance in the group, this particular study didn't find significant differences in the results between the male and female runners for these specific measured variables, though other research has sometimes shown differences in general biomechanics.
Right. Okay. So let's get to the results. What did they find? Did the hypothesis hold up?
It did, and quite clearly. So first off, as running speed increased, the mean cadence also increased significantly. It went from about 169 steps per minute at the slowest speed up to nearly 178 steps per minute at the fastest. So faster speed, faster steps, as you'd expect.
Okay, about a 9-step per minute increase overall.
Yes. But, and this is really crucial, all of the measured ground reaction force variables also increased significantly with increased speed. Every single one they measured. So for instance, that overall peak vertical force, how hard your foot hits the ground, it increased from approximately 2.3 times body weight up to about 2.5 times body weight.
Wow, that's quite a jump.
It is. And the vertical average loading rate, which we know is a critical injury risk factor, saw a really substantial jump by nearly 30% from slowest to fastest speed. And concurrently, as speed went up, both stance time and step time decreased significantly. Your foot spends less time on the ground. For example, stance time dropped from about 0.28 seconds down to 0.24 seconds.
Less ground contact time? Makes sense if you're moving faster.
Exactly. And interestingly, their calculated stride length also increased quite a bit as speed picked up, from around 0.98 meters to 1.38 meters.
Okay, so lots of significant changes all moving together with speed.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something earlier. There's this fascinating subset of runners. What was that about?
Yes. This was really interesting. Within the study, there was a small group, 8 runners specifically, who did not significantly change their cadence.
At all, even going from a 10-minute mile to a 7-minute mile.
Well, less than a 4 steps per minute change across that whole speed range. So functionally, their cadence stayed pretty much constant.
Okay, so if their cadence didn't increase, how did they run faster?
That's the intriguing part. For this specific subset, they compensated for the increased speed by showing a significantly greater increase in their stride length compared to the other runners in the study.
So they reached out further with each step, rather than turning their legs over faster.
Precisely. It really highlights that there isn't just one way runners adapt to speed. It suggests not all runners respond to changes in running speed with the same degree of cadence adjustment. Some runners seem to rely much more heavily on lengthening their stride.
That does add a layer of complexity. Individual differences really matter.
They absolutely do. Now, if we connect this back to the bigger picture, the study's overall findings, higher speed leading to higher cadence and higher forces, are generally consistent with previous research. Faster running usually means faster steps, shorter time on the ground, but it also, pretty unequivocally, means higher forces impacting your body.
Okay, so for you, the runner listening, this brings us to what feels like the critical takeaway. We hear higher cadence is good, lower risk. But the study shows when you actually increase your running speed, even though your cadence does naturally increase a bit for most people, those ground reaction forces, the impact, still go up significantly. It's not like the increased cadence fully cancels out the effect of the higher speed on impact forces. Is that right?
That's exactly the implication. For experienced runners, increasing running speed seems likely to significantly increase the risk of running-related injury because of these higher ground reaction forces. Even with that natural bump in cadence, the forces, they seem to increase more dramatically than the protective effect, if you will, of the slightly higher cadence at those faster speeds.
So while individual nuances exist, like those stride lengtheners, the general trend for experienced runners is faster pace equals higher impact forces, period.
That appears to be the main finding, yes. The increased speed itself drives up the forces substantially.
Okay, so this information is really invaluable then for runners thinking about changing their training pace. Whether you're, trying to get faster for a race or just pushing yourself harder in workouts, it's clearly not just about how many steps you take per minute. It's about the sheer forces involved at those higher speeds and maybe understanding how your body uniquely responds.
Right. This deep dive has really shown us that as your running speed picks up, yeah, your cadence likely increases, but maybe not enough to offset the fact that those ground reaction forces also climb, potentially raising your injury risk. It's a subtle but pretty critical distinction to understand when you're thinking about training and pushing your limits.
Absolutely. And the fact that some runners don't significantly change their cadence much as they speed up, opting for that longer stride instead, just adds another layer. It really underscores the complexity and the need for potentially personalized approaches to training. We don't all respond the same way.
So for you, the learner and runner listening right now, this really raises an important question, doesn't it? How can you best balance your speed goals with minimizing that injury risk? Especially knowing that your own individual biomechanical response might be unique, like those runners who lengthen their stride more. It's definitely something worth mulling over on your next run, maybe paying attention not just to your pace, but how your body actually feels and adapts as you speed up. How are you achieving that faster speed?